Welcome, welcome everyone to the SDE weekend. This is our first session on Friday. We have the honor to be able to share this space with Dr. Sundiata, who's going to say, just call me Sundiata. And this session is how to start a tuition-free unschooling co-op business. I'm going to mute my mic and turn it over to Sundiata to go ahead and get started.
All right. Once again, hello, everyone. Wherever you are in the world, I know we're in all different time zones, but it's good to see you all. And I appreciate you all choosing to spend some time with me today. So I want to preface this by letting you know that I am still getting over being sick. So the brain is not operating at full capacity today. I didn't sleep well last night, but I'm going to talk a little slower, and hopefully that will allow me to convey the things that I need to convey in a coherent way. If I bumble or stumble, be patient with me. If I take a moment to clear out the nasal passage, please be patient with me, etc. All things, etc. Also, it would be really helpful. Thank you for the healing energy. Thank you. It would be really helpful if you all engage and ask questions to maybe bring up things that I may not remember that I want to bring out. So just your questions. I want to invite you to really, let's make this conversational. I do have some slides to guide us, and hopefully what you see on the slides will also prompt questions from you that will bring out everything that needs to be brought out from me based on my experience. And I know it will, and I know we're going to have a really, really good conversation, discussion about this info. So with that being said, I guess a little bit about me. So these days, because it's always iterating how I introduce myself, but I consider myself an entrepreneur and an anti-oppression facilitator, content creator, and organizer. So under the umbrella of those things, I have done and I do a lot of things. And what I could share is that they're all purpose driven. I've organized my life in a way where, I do work that is aligned, with who I am and my life's mission. And my life's mission is my mission statement or overarching drivers for me are liberation, social and environmental sustainability, and unconditional love for all. So those values or drivers drive and influence everything I do. And if it isn't aligned with that, then I'm not doing it. I've made a lot of sacrifices to get to this place in my life. It hasn't been easy, but I'm grateful, because ultimately I've landed in the space where I get paid to do work I'm passionate about doing. And that's the ultimate goal and dream, right? and not only get paid, but, I'm able to get paid sustainably. And I'll share with you all that literally just happened last year. So, I was riding around Ubering with a doctorate degree because I refused to go and work for organizations that weren't aligned. Driving around Ubering with a doctorate degree, as well as a lot of business experience, because I refused to go and work for companies where I could probably fit in a lot of different ways and make really good money. But if it wasn't aligned, I wasn't doing it. So, I took a lot of heat. I've taken a lot of heat and pushback from family and friends over the years who just didn't understand my path and why I do the things I do and why I podcast and get these messages and out in the world that I'm passionate about, or write, or just do all the things I've done, including starting an unschooling cooperative that I didn't want to charge money for. So I didn't want to make money. I didn't want to make money doing it. So, just all these unconventional ways of being in the world that I kind of have the path I've chosen. It's been an interesting journey. So I hope that through this conversation, this discussion, ultimately, you'll hear me use the word dialogue a lot. But I distinguish what that means from conversation and discussion. But ultimately in this, gathering and this offering, you all will be able to bring out whatever you need from me that will help, support you and wherever you are in your journey. But I like to start out just by sharing all the ways that I show up in the world in unconventional ways, because this is going to be a very unconventional, presentation. So that's a little bit about who I am. I'm also a dad. I have 2 children, a 9-year-old son named Scotty, a 13-year-old daughter named Skyla. And their journey has been interesting because they're currently in a Montessori school, and they started out in Montessori for several years. And then when I started my program, I was able to unschool them for the first time. And then towards the end of my program, I went through my divorce, and my co-parent decided to put them back into their Montessori school. And she's never been fully aligned with me and being a conscious parent, gentle parent / unschooling parent. I've been the one, I was the one, and to this day, I am still the one who lives that way and parents that way. And she's still more conventional. When we were together, she kind of just left all of it to me. So I kind of was able to, bring our kids up with these understandings and these processes, these awarenesses. But then once we divorced 4 years ago, the children have had to be bilingual in a sense. They've had to learn how to navigate her more conventional parenting style when they're with her, and then, or code switch. We can say that as well. And then, how to operate and live when they're with me. So that presents a lot of challenges, as I'm sure you all can imagine, that I face and that they face, but we're navigating it. So that's another level of complexity and experience that I'm bringing to this chat as well, that some of you may resonate with someone here. So I wanted to share that. Let's see. Anything else relevant in it from an intro perspective? I am in the Metro Atlanta, Georgia area, just 30 minutes west of the city, in a town called Douglasville. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, born and raised, and I moved to Georgia in 2007. I am seeing the chat, so thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead. Did someone say something? Oh, okay. Okay, I was a school teacher. I come from I'll go there. I grew up in a family of conventional public school educators. So, when I grew up, education was like, really, really everything in our family. On my father's side, my grandfather had a college degree, and he went to school in his 30s. He put himself totally self-made in terms of putting himself through school, and went to the Army and got the GI Bill, one of the few African-American people who did back in those days, and graduated from Florida A&M University. And then all of his children went on to be college grads. And he went on to be like the principal for the segregated school, high school in a small town called Apalachicola, Florida. Then he went on, as segregation happened, he went on to be the principal of the integrated school. And then he went on to be like the area superintendent, and even ran for office for some type of education position on the school board that he had to run for in the town. And, he passed away in 2011, but now one of the wings of the school is named after him, and the street is named after him, where his house, he was very prominent, a very prominent educator, in that small town and on the panhandle of Florida. And, that influence, was prevalent in my life as I was growing up. My mother and father met at Florida A&M University. My mother grew up in Philadelphia, and went to school down there. She was really talented in math, and that's how she got down there on scholarship. Even though her family wasn't educated, she was one of the few members of her family that went on, I'll say conventionally educated. She was one of the few members of her family that went on to get a college degree. So then, just from my siblings and I growing up, that was what it was all about: going to school, getting the education. And both my mother and father are retired school teachers in the Philadelphia school system. Also, aunts, uncles were principals, teachers, etc. So that was it. So one thing that I knew for sure when I was a kid, it was that I did not want to be a teacher. And ultimately, that went on to change. So the abbreviated version is I went to school for business originally, and then I changed my major to education because I went one summer I did this summer program in North Philly, and I fell in love with children, fell in love with the influence I could have on young people, and decided to change my major to elementary education. Graduated with that degree, and then went into the business world. And it wasn't until about 6 years later, when the market crashed in 2007, 2008, when I moved to Georgia. I was heavily invested in real estate, and I lost a lot of property and things like that, that I had to get a real job. And I decided to teach. And when I got into teaching, here in Georgia, I taught for 5 years before I couldn't take it anymore. And but I learned a lot in public school system. I taught in the public school system for 5 years, and I learned a lot about what I didn't like. I took my entrepreneurial, very independent mind into that space, and immediately wanted to change everything. And I got a lot of pushback, and they were like, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I used to make a joke that I was easily fireable, because I always wanted to like buck the system. And eventually, one year they put me in a pre-K, and I like teaching the older young people. But one year they put me in pre-K because I said, do not put me in a testing grade where they have standardized tests that, high stakes testing grades. I said, don't put me in a testing grade after I had a couple years of having to deal with that. I said, just don't do it. Don't put me there. And they said, okay, we got you. They put me in pre-K, and that was hard. The next year they put me in second grade, and that was my last year, before I said I couldn't do it. And during that time, I went back to school, and that's when I started my doctoral studies. And I took a class called Thinking in Systems. And when I took this class called Thinking in Systems, I learned this concept called systems thinking. And it totally gave me words for the way I was thinking about the world. I now had like tools and processes to explain the dysfunctions that I was seeing in the school system, but also society as a whole. And the more I learned through my doctoral studies, while I was still teaching, the more it was uncomfortable for me to be a teacher. And it got to the point where I felt like I was being unethical being in that space, because I felt like the system was designed to hurt young people, hurt communities, hurt teachers. Like all these things became so evident to me, and it was like, I can't be here. And I started conceptualizing the idea for starting my own school. That's where I started there. And I said, I'm just going to start my own school. And eventually, I also had a nonprofit. I had an after school program, did a lot of things, even while I was still teaching, to kind of try to show up better for young people in ways that I couldn't during the day. So we did it after school. So fast forward, I was researching ideas for starting a school. And at first it was charter schools. This is probably like 2008, 2009. Charter schools are like all the rave. And it's like, oh, I can do one of those. But the more I researched, the more I studied, I realized it was just like public school light. It was the same thing, same rules, a little bit of freedom, but still gotta, abide by these tests. And start doing more research, learned about Montessori, learned about Waldorf, Reggio Emilia, all these things. And I started to light up, and I got excited, like, wow, there's alternatives out here. And then I learned about democratic free schools. And then I really lit up, and I said, ooh, okay, it's even more space and room to like really craft these ideas that I have in my head. And then somehow along that journey, I ran into unschooling, and I started reading a lot about unschooling. And for the first time, I got so excited because I said, this is a model or a framework where everyone can succeed just by being themselves. Because one of the biggest problems that I saw in the public school system was that it stratified young people. The system created successes and failures just by the way it was designed. And what I loved about unschooling when I first learned about it was like the idea that you're already a success. You don't have to earn success. You don't have to have certain skills to be quote unquote successful, which is what our whole capitalistic education, et cetera, conveyor belt is created on and built on, the idea that success has to be earned versus no, you were born capable and successful. And so when I looked around, and that's something I knew intuitively, when I looked around at all of my students when I was teaching, I saw success in all of them. I saw skills in all of them that I knew had value in the world, but there was no context for them to, all of them, to necessarily manifest that within that education system. I just knew I had to get away from it. So when I found unschooling, I was like, oh, it's on, this is it. And again, a lot of reading, a lot of studying at that point, just trying to wrap my mind around it, a lot of deschooling, because I would bump up against my discomfort. Again, I came up in a family of like stone cold educators, you know? So this was a process. And I walked away from teaching, and it was 2012, and began doing other entrepreneurial things while also studying and writing out this plan for the school I'm going to start one day. Reading a lot of books and finding people to learn from, you know, a lot of things I'm sure a lot of you have done. Ultimately, let's see, where do I want to jump? Okay, ultimately, okay, I have to tell you all the story because I think you will get a kick out of it. So while I'm going through this process, you know, I'm meeting with some folks in a tea shop one day in Atlanta. And because I'm always trying to connect with people and just, you know, build and vision build, et cetera. So I'm meeting with some folks in the tea shop. Long story short, I leave the tea shop, and at this point, I hadn't met too many people in Atlanta that were doing this whole unschooling thing. Everyone I was finding, all the resources I was finding were elsewhere. So I left this tea shop, and I go on Facebook, and I'm in this group, and someone in the groups posted that they were at the same tea shop that day. And I just happened to look at this person's profile. And I just said, you know, I was in the tea shop today too, you know, whoop-de-doo. So, you know, we just kind of made friendly around that. But then I looked at her profile, and it said Kid Cultivators Homeschooling Community. And her name was Leslie Bray. So I went to Leslie Bray's Facebook page, or the Kid Cultivators Homeschooling Community. And I'm like, oh, she's here in Atlanta, and she's doing unschooling. She's a person of African descent like me. Let me see what she's all about. So I'm scrolling through her page and reading and getting excited and getting lit up. But it said homeschooling. It didn't say unschooling, but it said homeschooling. But still, you know, this might be a connection. And then I see her talking about this lady named Akilah Richards several times on her page. So then I hover over this Akilah Richards person's name and went down the Akilah Richards rabbit hole. Like, oh my goodness, she's talking about unschooling. She has a podcast about it. Oh my goodness, specifically for people of African descent, like the young people that I'm trying to have an impact on with this. Because again, at this point, I'm working in the Title I community in East Point, Atlanta, with 99% children of African descent, low income, et cetera. But there wasn't anything out there that I was finding that catered to them in the unschooling space. It was primarily people of European descent, putting out the content, et cetera. So when I found Leslie and Akilah, it was like, oh my goodness. And then, so I'm on Akilah's website, and she has this whole feature like, leave me a message. I'm like, yo, Akilah Richards, my name is, at that time, I was still Scott Speed. I hadn't changed my name yet. And you're in Atlanta, I'm in Atlanta. Can we talk? I love what you're doing. I'm trying to do X, Y, Z. And that's how Akilah and I got connected. We met shortly after that, you know, we met, and I told her what I was up to. And if you all follow her, I've been on her show plenty of times. You may have seen me, and then we've done several trainings together, et cetera. But that's how I met Akilah. I just wanted to tell you all that. And then that's how I found ALCs as well. So I'm on Akilah's page, and I see she's interviewing Anthony and Julia from Heartwood ALC. And I'm, what's an ALC? So that's how I got here, you all. So you all may know, some of you may know that I do a lot of training within the ALC network as well. And that's how I learned about all of this. It was very synchronous, a very synchronistic happening. A sit down in the tea shop led me to my tribe. So I had to share that with you all. Okay. Let me get out of story time mode and get to these slides. Let me just pause there. You all following? We're good. Let me go to the chat. Anything I'm missing? Damari, do you need to level set anything here? Because I'm totally in story mode.
I'm just over here cracking up like, that's what I did too. So let me just preface this by saying, I'm not sure if you have permission to share your screen. So please try that now.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we did the right settings at the beginning of this. So.
All right.
Able.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Okay, so let me transition to screen sharing mode and get out of storytelling mode. But I hope that context was useful, and I hope it kind of just adds value in some way. Let me
As you do that, I'm just going to remind folks to turn their cameras off once you're in screen sharing mode, and then once you're out, we can come back.
All righty, now let me go back to try to share the screen. Okay, thumbs up if you can see my screen okay. Oh, everyone went off screen. I'm sorry, they were following directions. Okay, let's see. You can tell me in the chat.
We can see, we can see.
Okay, all right. I see in the chat too. Okay, you all are, okay, you appreciate these stories. You're liking this whole unfolding. All right, cool. All right, I'm sorry, I'm just taking a look at this really quickly. All right, awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I love telling that story. Because I just, again, the synchronicities of it all, man, it's been so beautiful. And again, like the underlying theme too for those stories is that it also kind of helped me continue to like hone in on living my truth. That's the other part of it all. Like the more people that I met who were aligned with me and the way I thought, the less, crazy I thought I was. The easier it was to kind of drown out the doubters. And it's just really important. This was before we had, things like the Alliance and et cetera. So yeah, it was so meaningful. So around that time, I had created a team and I was working on this plan to start Grow. And I officially hit the go button in 2015 on really putting Grow into action. And then I hit the pause button, and I hit the pause button because I started, doing the numbers and all the business stuff flooded in, right? And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do it for tuition free. And I said, if I can't do it tuition free, I don't want to do it. And I literally called up the people who had been volunteering, friends, parents, et cetera, people who were excited about the program. I said, I can't do it. I said, because I don't want to turn people away. I can't do it because I don't want to turn people away. My whole thing when I got into this, it was like, I need to be able to do this program for communities that don't necessarily get access to programs like this. Like the young people that I used to teach in Title I schools. And I remember like being really convicted around, if it can't be for free, I don't want to do it. And a friend of mine just encouraged me to do it. And he said to me, he said, you know what, if you start, and maybe if you have to start with tuition, you can work your way to being tuition free. And that's what he said to me to kind of move me off of that place of not wanting to start. And I remember at that time studying ALC. I was, at this point I was aware of the ALCs because of the story I just told you all. And one of the things that Heartwood was doing was a sliding scale tuition. And I felt like, okay, maybe that could be a happy medium. This sliding scale tuition idea can be a happy medium. And that got me off the not wanting to start, bump. And so we decided to push the go button and start with the sliding scale tuition. And I remember doing this like grand opening event, and my friends from like Heartwood and other folks in the unschooling community in Atlanta came. Akila came to support this event, and it was a go. We were ready to start. Grow was in motion, and we did start. And I'm gonna keep this continue to keep this authentic for you all. Unfortunately, literally a month later is when I separated. And about a month after that, So here's one. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it all the way 100 with you all. I had this space that we were gonna use, and the space that we were gonna use, the owners of that space pulled back because of the reason for my divorce. They learned I'm polyamorous, and that's the reason for my divorce. And when they learned that that was the reason for my divorce, basically, I got to the point where I wanted to live my truth, and my ex-wife, that wasn't her truth. So it just came to a head, and that's what ended our marriage. And so not only did she take my children out of the program that was just starting, which was crushing, it was heartbreaking for me. The people who had opened up space for us to use, at, I believe it was either no cost or low cost, pulled out on us. They were very religious people, and I won't go into polyamory. If you don't know what it is, you can look it up. But that happened, and so we had to scramble and find another space. So it bumped us back, and we couldn't start when we initially wanted to. That summer, schools in Atlanta start around August, so we were going to start in like July, late July. And we didn't end up actually starting until September, because it took time to like kind of lick our wounds and find another place to open up. So that happened. Yeah. So then we're going. All right. So we're going, right? So we're going. Another thing that happened along the way was we started getting young people who were in families who were, the majority of them were at the lower end of the tuition scale. So, I can weave all that in at this point. So I'm just going to fast forward to say at some point, so we were getting people at the lower end of the scale, and I started to think about, okay, something has to change. This isn't going to, I'm not going to turn people away, because they're not at the higher end, or we're trying to balance out this scale to be sustainable, to pay our rent and to pay, staff and, all the expenses, right? Business stuff, right? And juggling that, there was decisions that had to be made, and we got through that first school year. But there were hard decisions that had to be made. Like, some people can't get in if they don't make a certain amount of money, and they're not able to pay at this level of the scale, and all those things that I didn't want to do, I found myself having to do in that first year, that was very uncomfortable. So by the time the next year rolled around, where we were operating, it was like, all right, I had sat down and I started conceptualizing these cooperative models. Like, how can we do this where no one has to pay? And that's basically what I'm about to present to you all. And I'll share with you all that at that final year of Grow, the cooperative, we were successful in finding all the pieces to the puzzle. And then me and the other primary co-facilitator / co-founder, we had a falling out, unfortunately. And in addition to that, also, because my children were no longer part of the program, the way that I designed the program, I designed myself out, because in order for this cooperative model that I'm about to explain to you to be equitable and to work, all contributing adults have to have children in the program. And my children were no longer in the program. So in addition to she and I having a falling out, I needed to spend time making money to sustain myself. And now, to sustain myself, I'll just put it that way. So again, because I didn't want to make money in a program, I had to design myself out. That's the best way to put it. So I left the program to her and the other families who were still there, and I walked away because of she and I's disconnect, as well as the practical reasons I just explained. And then about a few weeks later, I did a video. I wrote up this presentation I'm about to share with you, and I did a video about it as well, that any holes that don't get filled in this presentation, you can go to my website and actually watch this video. So that's a lot of context. I hope that it helps, and it seems like you all are following and appreciating it. So, this is in the conventional space. So I'm sure that you all can vibe and align with the personal story interweave with what I'm sharing with you all. All right, so let's get into it. Thank you for riding with me to this point and listening. And yeah, here we go. How to start and run a tuition-free unschooling cooperative Unbusiness. All right, so who is this for? Let me get my screen set up here so I can see this chat and my notes. So it's for unschooling parents and young people who are interested in being a part of a learning community to diversify and possibly enhance their learning experiences. Not interested in the time commitment required to start and operate a conventional business, and those who are seeking liberation from conventional systems. So one of the things I want to share up front is that a lot of times over the years when I was in the thick of starting up a program, a lot of people had questions about like legalities. If I'm going to unschool my child, what are the legal ramifications for my state, et cetera, and what are the next steps, et cetera. And there were some families, every state is different when it comes to those things. And I know there's people here all over the world, so every jurisdiction has different laws for homeschooling. And most parents, unschooling parents will follow the unschooling laws, et cetera, to declare that they're homeschooling follow the homeschooling laws to declare that they're homeschooling their child. And then they would put them into unschooling programs, or they will unschool them at home. And then there were some parents who didn't do any of that. They just said, I'm unschooling my child and I'm just doing it. Because the reality is, I don't know where you are, but in most places, there was no one going around knocking on doors in the present day trying to figure out, who's homeschooling versus unschooling or whatever. So there's that. Here's what I could share with you about what I'm going to share. I use the term unbusiness for a reason. This is not, what I'm going to share with you is not conventional in any way. I look at it as a forward-thinking innovation. And oftentimes when it comes to innovation, those happen outside of the current parameters. They push the boundaries on what the law sees as possible in the current moment. And that's ultimately how laws end up getting revised later, because enough people are willing to do that. And, for what I'm going to present, there's no asking permission. You just have to want to do it. You have to do it. The liberation that I'm presenting here is something that, you just have to do. It has to be in you to do it. And I understand that, what I'm going to share and the ways I'm going to share it, just depending on your risk tolerance, your go against the grain tolerance, it's going to vibe with you to a different degree. But one of the things that I like to say up front is that this is rooted in liberation. And I think back to, Harriet Tubman, when she decided that she was going to liberate herself and then also go back and liberate others. She didn't ask for permission to do that, right? When I think about, the Haitians, and when they fought for liberation and became the first predominantly, country that was predominantly run by people of African descent to gain liberation, their freedom and liberation from Europeans, they didn't ask for permission. They didn't ask for, they didn't ask for permission. They just did it. And that's the spirit of how I kind of think about the ways that I think the innovation, the social innovations that I feel like are needed to bring about liberation. I don't look for laws to align with those. I just think about liberation. So I just wanted to preface it with, this conversation with that. And you all will have to find yourselves within it, if this is going to resonate with you and if you're going to be able to pull pieces of it to apply to your journey. All right. So the problems that this model seeks to solve. So number one, balancing affordability with program sustainability. So one of the things, I've kind of shared it already about my struggle with that, but one of the things that bothered me was not only my program and the challenges we had to go through, But I also saw other amazing programs in the Atlanta area shut down over the years, other unschooling based programs. There was one program in particular that comes to mind that was geared specifically for children on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. That was an unschooling space for them that shut down because of, finances. And that bothered me. It's like, when I think about people who are in the world doing work for young people to create space for them to grow up and thrive in the ways that are most, they can show up in their most authentic, as their most authentic selves. Like, that shouldn't even have an opportunity to get shut down. But only within the capitalism, the conventional business model, is that even a possibility. So again, that's why I'm interested in creating unbusinesses, things that are protected from failure and shutting down and closing. So that's what this model is attempting to solve for. That's one of the things it's attempting to solve for. In addition to that, a lot of times when people start programs like this, they'll go the nonprofit route. And, I've run a nonprofit before, I've done the fundraising thing before, et cetera. And one of the things that I've learned is that, I was naive in my young 20s starting this nonprofit, thinking I'm just gonna, once I get that 501c3, which we successfully did, once we get that, the money will show up. Well, guess what? Just like in the conventional business world, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of competition in the nonprofit world as well. Everyone's getting hit up asking to donate to this or that cause. So you end up, or I'll speak for myself, I ended up competing with people for funding instead of focusing on the work. That is frustrating. And I want no parts of that anymore. I'll never do another nonprofit because, I think I've said enough. I think you all get where I'm going with that. So it's still, the pressures of capitalism are being designed out. And that's another way that it is designed out. I'll go into facilitator burnout. One of the things that I noticed within my program, as well as my peers in the unschooling spaces over the years, is that a lot of times the facilitators were facilitators by day and business owners by night and weekend. And, working with the young people all day, then working with adults and legalities and fundraising and all these things. And it burns people out. And a lot of the programs, again, a lot of the programs that I've seen over the years that I've been operating in this space have had a short lifespan because of that. And then also a lot of facilitators who typically are parents, they have their own lives, they have their own passions, their own interests that, get pushed to the side to get these programs started. And ultimately that there's a toll that comes with that sacrifice over time. And this model is designed with that in mind as well. It's thinking about everyone. It's not trying to disadvantage adults and says that adults have to, sacrifice it all for the young people. It's like, how can we spread out, the efforts that it takes to make the program run so that everyone can truly be happy? So that's a key goal. Let's see. I'm going to go a little further, then I'll stop for questions. All right. Let me think. Do I want to stop there? No, I'll stop now. Oops. I want to pause. I've been talking a long time. Any questions on what I've shared so far? Any clarity needed?
Hey, can I unmute myself, right?
Yes.
Hey, Sundiata, thank you for sharing all of this and for giving us all of the context, because that's super helpful. I just had a logistical question. I was curious to know how many kids you all had in Grow.
Yeah.
And for families.
At the height of Grow, we had 12 young people a part of the program. And just off top, I'm trying to think of like families. Let's say, yeah, it varied because, there was people that left that came and went. There's some things I'm going to share about that too. But yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. I would say about 12 young people. let's see, 12, about that at the height, and the number of families kind of fluctuated. Does that help?
Yeah, and did all of the caregivers contribute, like play roles as facilitators as well as the young people? Like I'm curious to know, like when you mentioned facilitator, was it just bringing in outsiders? Was it a combination of
Okay.
outsiders, adults, young people?
So I'm going to get to that. But that's a good question.
Okay.
So I'm gonna table that one. Thank you for that. I'm going to get to that in the unfolding of this presentation. Anything else?
Carice, did you still have a question that you wanted to ask? I saw you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, jump on in.
My brain just went into a fog. Oh, you guys were still at a facility, correct? Or in a
You're saying, I'm sorry, can you, you're asking when we were at the co-op stage?
I think.
Okay, so once we got to, we left the paid facility, and we eventually got to a facility where, as a contribution from one of our co-op members, we were able to use their space. So we weren't, once we transitioned to co-op, we got to a free space, which you'll hear as a part of this model.
I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll continue on because I think a lot of those questions will get answered. I'll just, yeah, okay, I think it's best to continue on because some of your questions are where I'm going. All right. So again, you heard me mention the concept of being fail-proof, which was very important to me when I was conceptualizing this, and the reasons why it was important to me. Because again, when the work what we're trying to do is there shouldn't be any context for failure. The same way that within the concept of unschooling, there are no failures. I believe, from a business perspective or from an operational perspective, that there shouldn't be a concept for failure either. So a part of me creating this, it was like, if we're working on our mindsets and we're shifting and we're deschooling and we're unlearning things to wrap our minds around the benefits of unschooling, then I also think it's important for those that this resonates with to also be willing to do the work to start deschooling and unlearning, to unlearn and et cetera, to, wrap our minds around unbusiness, the concept of being an unbusiness, so that, there's no failure in business as well, and protecting our young people and protecting our efforts in that way as well. And there's, unfortunately, from my experience to this point, there's no way to do that within the context of conventional business. So how can you have a fail-proof startup? Well, first, there's a couple of things that have to be in place already in order for this to work. And there's gonna take people who have what I'm about to explain in place to create that foundation for others, because everyone's not going to be able to do this. Okay. So the first thing is that you're already unschooling, because that's important. In order for what I'm sharing with you to work, you already have to be unschooling, because what that says is you've already created the space in your life and you already have the conditions, the necessary conditions to unschool. And we know that everyone doesn't have that, unfortunately, right? A parent's able to stay home already, whatever the financial supports whatever the support, socio-economic supports that make that possible, that takes sacrifice in itself. So, you already have that in place. The next thing is you have space. You have a space. Excuse me. So in order for this to work, you have to have a space that you're able to use at no charge. So whether that's someone who's able to open up their home to run a program like this, or they have access to a community space, a church, a community center, a local business that they can access at no cost, those things will be needed in order for this to work. If there's no free space, what I'm explaining, this whole cooperative business model won't work. Okay, because again, we're steering clear of capitalism. That means we can't have overhead, right? So in the context of grow, once we left the place we were paying rent to, going into our second operational year, we found a family through synchronicity, again, we found a family that had space. You know, they were more of a homeschooling type family, but had some unschooling tendencies, and they met us and we met them and we talked, and they were like, we have this space. They tried to run like a homeschooling program out of that space before, and they were looking for like some people to come in and help with that. And it just worked out. When I say synchronicity, literally on Craigslist, my co-founder, co-facilitator found this family. And then we met, and it all lined up. And when I say synchronicity, y'all, just so you know, like this family that I'm talking about, like we are still family to this day. And we still collaborate and we're still in community with each other. We're still in collaborative community with each other. Even though we're not doing this, we're doing other things together. And I'm so grateful for that. As I've said with everyone else that I've mentioned in this story, I'm still collaborating with everyone. So with that said, we met, they're the Seals family. They have something called the Seals Family Farm, and they're this homesteading, one of the very few African-American homesteading families in Georgia, or in the world, but like in Georgia near where we are. And they had acreage, and they had a lake out, or a pond, or I guess it's a small lake out back, and like all this space, and they had like farm animals, and it was just like the perfect setup. And we were able to run the school upstairs. They lived on the bottom level of the building. We were able to run the program upstairs. It was amazing. And they had children that were part of the program. So that was a part of their contribution. Okay, so, and then when you see it, where it says start as a cooperative, where members chip in time and resources, we'll go there. So again, you're not going to have quote unquote facilitators that get paid. So this is where the families have to chip in to be the facilitators. The adults have to chip in to be the facilitators, as well as chip in to provide all the resources that are necessary. And I'll get into more of that next, what that looks like. All right, so what does that chip in process look like? Give me a second here, I need to reorient my screen. All right. So in terms of space, I gave you an example how the space worked with us. It could also be a situation where there's a fixed location like it was with us, or it could be a rotation where, you know, you're rotating to different families' homes, whether it be a weekly rotation or, you know, however it works. There could be a rotation where the families kind of share that burden, okay, for where the young people meet. The other thing I want to say about this, everyone, this is an important time. Think small. The best thing about what I'm sharing with you is that growth isn't necessary. Because when you're operating outside of capitalism, you don't need growth. This can happen with a family a size of 3 young people. It could be 5 young people. It could be 6 young people. This happens in small pods. It doesn't have to be large. Depending on the capacities of the people involved, you know, when we were running a program in a conventional model, we had to grow because we needed to make more money. So we were always recruiting and always having to, you know, raise money and always having to find, you know, more students. And sometimes some of those families weren't even fully aligned with what we were doing, but we needed the money. So we had to accept them. And ultimately, more families came and went. We were able to be more discerning, and we were able to say to people, you know, we didn't have to sacrifice who we were when we were operating in this co-op model. And we were able to say to people, you know what, I don't think you're a good fit. And be honest. I'm sorry, we were always honest, but there were certain, I think you all know what I'm trying to say. There was a certain level of discernment that we were able to bring to the process when we didn't have to care about money. So wanted to say that. So time, facilitators, different roles. You know, when you have the families, everyone has different skill sets. You know, I was the organizational person, right? My other partner worked with the young people more so than I did. You know, social media marketing and the things like that we did, because when we were in the growth phase, you know, we did those things. Again, if you don't have to grow, you don't ever have to touch social media to do any of that stuff. If you are in the initial phases and you're just looking to find your tribe, then social media is good, you know, when you're first starting out. And we'll talk about that here in a moment as well. But where it says time, and you have facilitators, organizational facilitators, social media marketer, external contributors, these are the different roles that different families can play to contribute, to chip in. And when I talk about external contributors, what I mean by that is, let's just say there's, adult members of the community who they have to work a job where they can't chip in, on a day-to-day working with the young people in the space. Well, guess what? They may be a mechanic, and their contribution may be, everyone in the co-op gets oil changes. That's the contribution. We actually had a doctor as a part of our co-op, and she was able to offer her services to members of our co-op. She was a doctor that had it was a unconventional practice where it was a non-insurance practice, and it was like a monthly membership type thing. And she was able to provide that at no cost for members of the co-op. She wasn't able to be there, and she also was able to contribute money. She also gave money, and she was able to give that discount. So, there's other ways that people can contribute to the co-op. Let's see. In terms of resources, again, everyone chips in on supplies, materials, snacks. Families brought snacks. When they went shopping, they just bought a little extra, and they just dropped them off at the space that we were using. And we always had snacks, and people, we would send out a list of the supplies that we needed, and people would raise their hand and say, I can bring that. I can bring that. I can bring that. In terms of, supplies, materials, snacks, and also contacts and resources for the experiences that we wanted our young people to have out in the world, or someone to come in. If a young person wanted to learn about something that we didn't have the skill set for, then we all just tapped into our networks. We all shared everything. We chipped in and we cooperated to make it run. So I'll stop there. Are there any specific questions about this, this section that we're talking about?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Were you guys rotating? Okay, this question is specific for me because I'm working. I feel like I'm doing this exact same thing, but I'm working with quote unquote preschoolers. So I'm working with young kids. Moms are dropping off. I have a group of 4 of them, and I am the facilitator. And so I don't know if this applies to you because it seems like you were working with older kids, and as they get older, they're their own facilitator in theory in the unschooling model. And so, yeah, my question was if you guys had anybody who was leading those groups specifically. But I guess that question is, I don't know.
No, we absolutely had younger children in our program.
You did?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were preschool ages?
Yes.
Okay. So did you guys have a rotating facilitator? Did you guys pay for one facilitator? Because I am being paid. I'm not a parent. I am just a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
And they are paying me, and this
entire
class right now is blowing my brains out. It really is. I really appreciate you. So yeah, I guess that's my question. If you guys had rotating facilitators, if the parents were doing it, if you paid somebody.
So we actually, my co-facilitator, she got paid. So yes, she was getting paid. We paid her a stipend. And we paid her a stipend. And once we went to the Unbusiness model, no, we didn't report any of that. We paid her. We gave her money.
When you say stipend, my brain immediately goes to nonprofit. What do you mean?
Yeah, because I'm using that word because that's how we started. Because we started out running the program under a nonprofit. But once we shift, this is a transitional process that I'm sharing with you. We went from being conventional business to Unbusiness.
I see.
Yeah. So initially we were calling it a stipend that we were paying her. And then eventually it just went to, we were just giving her money, and it was just, because she was showing up day to day. She had a toddler that was a part of the program, and she was there every day. And it was like, since she's there consistently on a day to day, in addition to her contributing because her child was there, she got a small amount of money as well, just because she was showing up with that level of consistency. And these are the type of things that, within your co-op, you all can be flexible. Again, for anyone this is resonating and they feel like they can do something like this, you make your own rules. This is Unbusiness life. Make your own rules in these ways.
It's the tough life, man.
So kind of like under the table, In the conventional sense, people would say, she was making money under the table.
And you guys were doing this 5 days a week?
We were operating 4 days.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 days.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. What hours were you operating?
Let's see if I can remember. Oh, I think I don't remember. I would have to dig into our notes, archive notes and things, which I do have.
It was like more of a drop-off opportunity for parents who worked.
Yeah, we definitely were available for those parents who work conventional hours. They could drop off, and we were available.
So, like, when you would get a new family, interested, would you just kind of sit down with them and see like what their contribution would be, or would that evolve over time, or did you have any kind of like informal agreement?
Yeah, we had a process for all of that. I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit next. Okay. But yes, that was sitting down with them. That was all a part of the process. Like, how can you contribute? Like, this is who we are. This is how we operate. How do you see yourself contributing?
Can I say something?
Yes.
I don't know who just asked that question. As what we're doing right now is I'm reading the chat. So I'm answering a question in the chat. We are running from 9:30 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. because the moms are really concerned about longer hours for the little babies. And we are also, strangely enough, using like the school system for time off. Somebody just asked about holidays in particular and time of the year and stuff like that. And this is with room that's with room for us to make our own, but we're using it as a guide.
Yeah, and I can say, because I saw some questions in the chat about that as well. Any parent, like for the person, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at your name right now, who wrote something about the not liking the conventional school schedule, like totally was up to the parent. You can come when you wanted to. There was only like one thing that we asked that everyone was there for, and that was like our community meeting, like, for the young people to be there when we're making decisions and we're talking about agreements and, all those things that we needed to talk about together. That was the only thing that we asked for folks to commit to. But other than that, whatever time was comfortable for the family, like that was it. It was no, like, you have to be here for this amount of time. None of that existed in our space. Let's see, how do you generate revenue for your own family's needs while running this? So, Sylvie, again, if you remember at the beginning, I said that, oh, I'm sorry. So you're saying this whole model is predicated on families who are already unschooling. So that means someone somehow, some way already has a level of flexibility and freedom, who's setting the foundation for this. And not just someone, but several someones, and then external contributors who can't even do that can later come in to provide other resources to the community, to the cooperative. But yeah, like if someone who has a job, that would prevent them from being able to put time into like working with the young people and facilitating with the young people, this wouldn't necessarily work for. The people that would have the whole context for this would have to already have space, whether it be they have flexibility in their work, or, one parent's working while the other isn't, and they're already unschooling, et cetera. Or if you're lucky enough to find a community that has already created this foundation where they're saying you can come in as a contributor, an external contributor, that's where the term external contributor comes in, then that's how you contribute. And if you need any context beyond that, please come off mute and ask. I'm going through the chat to see if there's any other questions. Okay. And I'll continue on tomorrow. If you think there's anything that I missed in the chat, please let me know. Oh, I see one. Was gender equity an issue? Let's see, was gender equity an issue in your co-op? Gender equity, like majority women and GNC people taking on most of the caregiving roles while cis are mostly supporting indirectly or not at all. Okay, so what I can say to that is, there was another man that was very prominent in our program once we got to the co-op stage, just because of the way that he and his family, the homesteaders, they had already created the context for their life where they were able to be present. You know, they both parents were there, you know, so he was very present and prominent, as well as I was. So not necessarily as much of an issue in ours. Yeah, I could say that. I don't think it was much of an issue in ours. I will say that in general, throughout the lifespan of the program, I did find where there was mostly the moms who were the most engaged, who were the most like interested in doing the work of the deschooling and, you know, making the sacrifices to create this type of freedom and liberation for their young people. And a lot of times the dads had to be dragged along, or they were the ones, you know, bringing all the skepticism and et cetera. So yeah, that's an issue. That was an issue, and it definitely fell along those lines, unfortunately. All right, let me go on to the next slide here. Recruitment and partnership. So recruitment. So this is a little bit about how I was able to like find my people, and how you can do the same if you're someone that's, you know, not currently connected to community, an unschooling community already. So by visiting local homeschooling and unschooling groups and meetups, when I first started, I literally created a meetup on meetup.com. And this is how I found my co-facilitator. I wrote up my vision and I plopped it on meetup.com. And she came out, I reserved a room at the local library. And the person who went on to be my co-founder, she came out to the first one. She had just moved from New York with her and her daughter. She was looking for, you know, something like this, and she found me, and we were like this after that first meeting. She was totally committed, locked in. So that's one of the ways that you can find your tribe if you're starting by yourself, like I was when I initially started. Join existing Facebook groups. There's so many Facebook groups now around this. You can find your tribe, and online forums like Alliance Forum, and also create a Facebook group and give it a name, like founding an ALC/or Unschooling Cooperative in your town, and start sharing stories, goals, and your process and where you are and resources, and you'll start attracting your tribe that way. Any questions about that? If you don't use Facebook, no, let's see.
I have a question. I also have a little person that may make some thoughts, share some thoughts. Okay. My question is, if you, I'm wondering if you feel comfortable sharing about your process of trial and error, and like as you sort of began that process of establishing relationship and trying to find your tribe, like were there certain things you felt you needed to you learned that you had to more clearly communicate on what that was like, or because I just have gone through this process for a minute, and it doesn't always work well the first time. Oh. People aren't always on the same page.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, yes. With this whole unschooling thing. So any insight would be helpful.
It's not easy, and it takes persistence. It takes, yes. Thank you for asking me to do that. It's lonely. It's lonely. It's not easy. It takes having a willingness to be rejected, to be misunderstood, to have people not be as committed as you. There was a lot of like stops and starts, and you know, people came and went. So yeah, all of that happened on my journey. So yeah, that's what I can say about that. When I was going through this process, though, that's when I was more so in the space of trying to start a conventional business. When I was doing the recruitment initially, if I was more in the space of Unbusiness, I wouldn't have cared if it was just 2 to 3 of us, and we would have got started, and we would have, if it would have grown, it would have happened organically. And I would have been totally okay if it was just, again, my children and her child. If that's how we would have started back then, if I was in Unbusiness mindset when I was in recruitment phase, that would have been it. And then we'd have naturally, organically attracted, and it would have been no rush because we wouldn't have had the pressure of having to, pay bills. So that's what I'll say about that. I would have approached it differently when I was going through that trial and error and meeting, going through all that, if that makes sense. But yeah, any other questions about this, the recruitment, trying to find your people process? Okay, yes, Shimei, absolutely. Learning from those errors, learning how to refine our pitch, right? Our language, our approach, who I am, what works for me. It's like all relationships, right? Some relationships are good fits, and sometimes it takes time. Some are good fits, some aren't, and sometimes it takes time to discover that. But ultimately, we keep the main thing, and it being about these children, it be about this unlearning and this deschooling and et cetera. In time, we're going to attract the people who are going to stick. Oh, and there's so much unlearning that goes on through the process, but that's a part of the liberation process. So what you'll find out is that you're not just creating space for your young person to be liberated. You're also going through your own liberation process through it all, because that's what happened for me. So yeah. All right, I'm going to go on. Let's see here. So when we got to the partnership process, we had a 4-step process. And it started with asking folks who were interested in partnering with us to do their research. Because a lot of times, these were people who weren't yet familiar with unschooling. So there was a few articles that we would share with them and ask them to read. And then, let's have a discussion about it. Let's see where, how it feels for you. And then there would be a visit. And then there would be more discussion after the visit. And that's what we call the interview, but more discussion, another meeting to talk about, what they felt after the visit, any more questions, et cetera, et cetera. And then if everything felt good, then we had like an online application process using like Google Forms in terms of like what they can contribute and all the pertinent questions that we need to answer, in terms of everything, for their young person, like allergies and blah, blah, blahs. And, even questions like, when your young person's upset, what's the best way to care for them? Like just all the questions that are pertinent, right? That was the online application process. But that was how we went through our partnership process. Are there any questions there? Or maybe I'll just
My question is, are you willing to share those documents that you used?
Yeah, I am. So I am. I just have to wrap my mind around how, but if you're interested in that, I'll share my contact info at the end and you can reach out and I'll add you all to that Google Drive and you can have at it. There's a Google Drive that all this stuff exists. The history of all this exists, and I'm definitely willing to share it with everyone. Okay. All right. Okay. Next slide here. Free tools and resources. All right. ALC Starter Kit is online. There's so many resources. Literally in the last 2 to 3 years, especially after 2020, opportunities like this and others have popped up like crazy. So this is outdated. But the ALC Starter Kit was something that I really leaned on heavily when I started my program. And obviously Fair to Free Child podcast, that's Akila's podcast, certain episodes like the Parent Founders episodes 108 through 111 is very useful when trying to get in the mindset of this type of model specifically. And obviously raisingfreepeople.com, but also my website now, drsundiata.com. Under Unschooling, I have all the resources. And now that you all said that, I think I'm just going to add a link there that has to give everyone access to the Google Drive where all the growth stuff is. And then, so it can just be like a open source, resource center. So I will do that. That'll be on my to-do list. So the website is Dr. Sundiata, drsundiata.com, drsundiata.com. That's where you can find access to all of my work, including all of my unschooling work, my talks, everything is there. But yeah, I'm going to do that. Okay. So I think that's it. So we can open it up for the last 15 minutes. These are some of the tools that I use for free. You know, it's like, what free tools could I use? Share Google Drive, Trello, Google Sites, Google Forms, Slides, Carnival, Seesaw for portfolios for the young people. These are all free tools that we used. Again, no expenses. You know, no overhead was the goal. So I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, and there's the site and everything. All right. So I'll stop there for the last 15 minutes and open it up for any Q&A or any wisdom. I know Shimei was sharing some wisdom that anyone else would like to jump in and share. I'm going to shut up and let you all take over. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you. This was super helpful. I'm kind of in the transition process of starting my own center out of my house and trying to figure out how to either make money off the center or get my employment in order and have other people who can help watch my kids so I can work. I'm in the middle of a divorce and I have the same situation where if I can't figure out what to do with them, he's going to make them go back to public school. So I have to figure out how I can keep this going and keep myself financially stable.
Yeah.
This was just like, I feel like the universe sent me to you today. So I really appreciate this.
Oh, so happy to hear that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And good luck.
Thank you.
I thank you also for sharing. I wanted to know, for me, I live in I think 98% white population here in Canada. And most of the homeschooling / unschooling community is predominantly white. That's not to say that there aren't Black or African descent folks here that are homeschooling or unschooling, but I find that I'm a little bit, or not a little bit, a lot afraid to create one that is, specifically for African descent, because like the white is so predominant, and I just don't want, I'm afraid to be bashed as, I don't know, you're separating why we have this thing going, why would you, so if you were in a predominantly white unschooling space, what would be your, I don't know, I guess your driving force to I don't know, I guess encouragement or words of wisdom to do it? Because yes, we're in those white spaces, but we don't feel like we don't fit, and it's like we're just in our own bubble. I'm literally the only Black family there, but yeah, just being scared to be like, let's create this. Yeah, I don't know what I'm asking, but
are you saying that you're asking, that you're thinking about, but you're kind of afraid to go off and create something that was more centered around the experiences of people of African descent?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm afraid to be attacked. I don't know. It's very white here, and people are very extreme, and I'm just scared of that type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you have to carry that fear. That sucks in itself. That doesn't feel like liberation. That doesn't feel like freedom. And I would, I don't know. Here, a lot of things going through my mind. One, the first thing I want to say is I just want you all to know that my space that I operated was open to everyone, no matter their ethnicity. And we had one family of European descent that opted to join us at some point. And they didn't mind being around predominantly people of African descent, and we were all open arms to them. It was just very clear in terms of this is how we operate. These are certain things that are a part of our experience and are important to us, et cetera, et cetera. And they fell in line with all those things. So it was all good. But all I can say to you is I just want to encourage you and empower you, or just not empower, but offer words that will hopefully empower you to say to trust your gut, trust your intuition. In my life, I felt the fear and done it anyway. I think that's what being a trailblazer, being a visionary, being a liberator is all about. It's not easy, but it's necessary. And I think that if you do make that decision, you'll find your tribe. That's really what I could offer you. And I saw someone put into the chat about listening to Akila's podcast, because she does have like resources that speaks to this that I think will, offer you some encouragement to kind of fortify you in the ways that you need to be fortified. So Fair of the Free Child podcast, probably more along lines of season 1 and season 2 will give you, I think will provide you everything that you need to get you where you need to be. Let's see. Thank you for speaking up. Okay, I see someone has their hand up, but I can't see your name, but please jump in.
My name's Caitlin. I just really massively want to acknowledge what you've just shared, Shia. And I live in Bristol, UK. Home education here is racially segregated. And the thought came to heart. I know that like white women we've long proven ourselves as non-trustworthy. And I really want to acknowledge that and apologize. And also, for what it's worth, I was just like, if you have people hassling you in Canada, send them to my inbox, and like happy to send my email your way and work on deconstructing whiteness with them and take on that labor.
Thank you. And if anyone else has any other words of wisdom, please share them.
Hi, yeah, this is Raquel here in Montreal. Is it okay if I go ahead?
Please.
And Shia, I completely understand, although I'm really glad I put that in the chat, because it connected with somebody else here in Montreal just now who is part of my tribe. But Shia, I totally understand. And somebody also asked a question following from something I dropped in the chat too, relevant to that, about what's the difference, white unschooling. I don't know if those were the words you used. And that's not necessarily what I meant, but maybe you know what I mean. But what I meant is that while I find that we're on the same page in thinking about unschooling in some ways, there's certain aspects of my experience, such as not wanting my family to be entirely surrounded by people who don't look like us, is just one thing. Another thing is there, things happening in the wider world that concern me, and I can't necessarily talk about it with this group because they don't get it. They don't understand why it hurts so much that a Black kid was killed the other day and people said he was because of a gang. He was in a gang when he wasn't. Or just all the ways that our minds are colonized in all the different ways and my mind might be colonized, and the work is to figure that out and unlearn those things. But they might just be thinking about self-directedness for their children, just what that means for their children, not necessarily what it means for how they're looking at the world. And the automatic ways they might be looking at the world, and whether they're willing to check so many assumptions and inheritances about how things work. So that's what I mean by white, quote unquote, white approach to unschooling. It's kind of like this, and it reinforces this idea that it's rich and privileged people. Like if I'm a part of this group that are mostly rich and privileged, or relatively rich and privileged, just a sec though. Then like I feel like I can't bring in anybody else, because I'm reinforcing this idea that you can only do this, or you only care about this because you have money. So yeah, so that's some of my issue why it feels so lonely.
Yeah, I can tell you, if you take this approach, this removes all of that. When you take the approach that I just presented with the Unbusiness model, you won't attract people that's their aim. And yes, I appreciate you even bringing that that nuance to this, Raquel, that yeah, there's people who take unschooling as more of a holistic life liberation, approach for themselves, well, for the whole family. And then there's others who look at it as just, a way to get to their capitalistic gains. There's definitely, levels. Anything else? Open dialogue. It doesn't have to even be about what we just talked about. If anyone wants to share anything about unschooling, ask any questions. There was like a personal question in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes.
And it's, it's probably, sorry, it's kind of a complicated question. I don't even know how to ask. So and it kind of ties maybe into this privilege thing. So I live in Mexico. My kids are half Mexican. I'm originally from Russia. And, I recently discovered unschooling, and like just maybe a week ago discovered, the SDE and ALC. And I found, one in Oaxaca where we actually are going to go in a month just to check it out and see if we can, if we like the community. But then, if we don't, then I am thinking, okay, I would have to create this on my own. And my concern is, am I only going to attract, because this does require maybe some type of more financial stability? Like, how do you attract the people, that here would be local? That how do you tell them that this, like, I guess for people who are maybe not as, who are not maybe as financially sound, to tell them to unschool their kids is like, how will their kids have success, right? Like when I grew up, we were, refugees and immigrants, and my parents, my success was school. Like that's how I was gonna succeed in life, right? I had a degree or things like that. So how do you promise others, that their kids will still be okay and succeed in this system if they're not going to get a diploma? Or I don't know if this question makes sense.
No, it
at
does.
all.
It does. I know where you're going with that. You don't. That's the first thing. You don't. So, and all I could share first, I could say, welcome, Julia. You're new to this whole journey, and there's so many. Someone said it takes a lot of deschooling. You'll learn the language. As you continue to read, as you continue to visit, as you continue to watch videos, you go to the websites and all the resources we're shared, you're going to get all the language and context for these type of things. Because we don't have much time, so I can't get deep. But all I can say is that you don't have to promise that. And you don't have to convince anyone of anything. You just state your intentions on why you want to organize a community around this style of learning, and you will attract the people who are speaking the same language. So I'll stop there because we can go so far into that, but I hope that helps.
Julie,
Thank you.
It's really amazing that you're trying to reach out to the locals in that area. I think I've heard of so many people who are in Mexico or in other countries that they're not from, and they're starting these like unschooling co-ops, and they're only attracting people who look like them and not local outside people. And so I guess it is your determination, keep doing it, because it would be amazing to hear people actually reaching out to locals. I see it so much. I see so much people not reaching out to the locals, and it is because it's hard. And we have been really colonized to think that going to a conventional school is the way to be and go. And we have to I'm having to reframe my mind in that way. and so are the people, like family members and stuff like that. So keep doing it. Keep working towards that goal.
Yes, keep going, keep going. Thank you so much, Sundiata, for all that you have shared. Thank you to everyone for your participation. This room is actually going to close in about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds. We're going to head into our break, and then our second sessions will be starting around 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific, I think. Yeah, no, it's still a little too early for me to be doing math in my head. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, you will have access to all of these recordings, and I will see you all in the second sessions.
Peace, y'all. Nice meeting you all. Reach out to me. Go to my website. I'll eventually post that link.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Mari.
for willing to share too.
No doubt.
I'm gonna grab all the resources.
Just give me a couple of days, but like midweek next week, check for that link on my website. And I'll let you know, Damari, when it's up, and maybe you can send out an email or something. I don't know, but I'll let you know.
Thank you.